Hello, my people, and welcome to Cities of Imagination. I'm Elizabeth Kruger, and this is my co-host.
Hello, from America.
And we are going to be discussing the alienation and a false sense of hope. We are soon to be professional urban planners, and we want to understand the importance of fictional worlds as an allegory for real-world problems. Fictional worlds allow us to have a common ground to speak about topics amongst a diverse range of people and demographics without that personal attachment to certain places.
And for this video, we'll actually be talking about the show Avatar: The Last Airbender. And in the show, the world is actually divided into 4 different nations: the fire, earth, water, and air, which all correspond to the different elements some people can bend to their will. So the show follows a team of children who are all from different nations who are actually helping the avatar Aang. So it's this guy who can bend all 4 elements. They are fighting against the Fire Nation, who is raging war upon the whole world. So we will not only be focusing on the plot of the show, but rather the main city, the centric city, the Ba Sing Se, so which also means the impenetrable city.
Ba Sing Se is the capital of the Earth Kingdom and was also one of the last places to be invaded by the Fire Nation because it was built as a defense against the Fire Nation during the Hundred-Year War. But alas, it still fell to the Fire Nation thanks to my queen, Princess Azula. The city is run by the Fire King, not the Fire King, that's so silly, the Earth King, and the secret police, the Dai Li, which hid under the veil of protecting the cultural heritage of Ba Sing Se. Now, we're going to be getting into the actual physical layout of Ba Sing Se, starting with the outer wall. So the outer wall, as you can see, it's massive. It was inspired by the Great Wall of China and it surrounds the entire city and is there to protect against the invasion from the Fire Nation, as we previously said. But it also acts as another thing, a barrier to immigration, because there are very few entrances and they are very highly policed. And the only way you can really travel in and out of the city is through this big, I'm going to call it a train system, which is run by earthbenders. The outer layer consists mainly of farmland, and very few people actually live in the outer layer. It's mostly some low-income people or farmers, and it's really there to feed the rest of the city. So I guess they get a point for sustainability and self-reliance. But yeah, as you can see in the corner here, it is massive. You can see it from really, really far away.
So then actually moving on to the second biggest ring, this is the lower ring. So this one has the highest population as well as the building density. Here you can see how close and how densified these buildings are. So the people who live here are the working class people, with many of them being refugees that are actually fleeing from the war against the Fire Nation. So in this area specifically, there's a lot of necessities, like the warehouses, also the types of industries that can be found in this area. So the streets are unpaved. However, the streets have a strange buzz in them, with activity from the businesses that are run out of people's homes. And out of all the rings, this lower ring actually has the most active life. Even though there are very few designated public spaces, like here you can see this public courtyard. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we only actually see one public space in the lowering once is when Zuko's going on his date. That's the only time we actually see one. Most of the time it's just that densely packed buildings and not very well maintained. Then we move into the middle ring. So the middle ring transitions from, abject poverty into the middle class, and it shows a lot more investment in the quality of life and the different features that is in the lower ring. So as you can see there in the architectural style, it changes. It's a lot more ornate. You can see these gold trims and green roofs. You have starting to get beautiful paved roads lined with plants, the cute little bridge over the river. But in the background, there's still that imposing wall, the separation from the other class. And as you can see, there again runs the train in the background. And the reason that the train is so high above the rest of the city is because they don't want people from different classes to interact. So high income people, they want to leave the city and come back, they never have to see anyone from the lower ring. And so yeah, the people in the middle income, they've got it pretty good. They've got some public spaces, a nice building, so large squares. And yeah, they're living it up pretty good, but still not as good as the upper ring.
Into the upper ring and the royal palace. So yeah, the upper ring is reserved for the political elites and is characterized by these large ornate homes with the spiraling green spaces and infrastructure that is available only to them. So those in the upper ring enjoy the safest part of the city because they have the three thick walls separating them from any danger and from those that they perceive as less than them. They use this not only they use those high walls to not only separate themselves, but also for the visual aesthetic of luxury. So the Earth King, who is actually seated at the highest possible seat, has another large wall protecting the palace itself, which is seated on top of many, many stairs, thereby showing off his power through the physical elements.
Yeah, because it's like really imposing down on the rest of the city. Imagine having to climb all those stairs. So now I want to talk a little bit about segregation. The ring system enforces a rigid class hierarchy, where the poor are kept in the outer ring with little opportunity to improve their livelihood and their status. The inner rings have, the upper ring have wealth, education, and services, but the lower ring can't access that. We can also see the cultural isolation, where the people in the inner ring are often unaware or deliberately kept unaware of the suffering that is happening in the outer ring.
And, and this system of exclusion actually reminds us of the apartheid system or the apartheid era. So, where they used physical and political elements to segregate individuals and groups. But instead of it being based on one's race, it's now being based on your class. Yeah, the matrix of domination not only includes the power struggles between those different classes, genders, or the different nations but also between those who can actually bend elements and those who don't have the ability to. So frequently it is shown that those with bending powers abuse it without care for how it could impact those without the power, as seen with the cabbage merchant, whose cabbages are always being destroyed thanks to some benders fighting again.
My
And
cabbages!
and then looking
So,
at the waterfall city, which is in Johannesburg, South Africa, yeah, we can see that they have these high walls in order to protect themselves, but also to protect their private property, which is basically an illusion of protection. They also have their own little private security system that prevents any as well as all informal traders. But in reality, this illusion of protection is because they don't really want to interact with others or those they view poorer than themselves.
and like we were saying previously, the wall in Ba Sing Se is inspired by the Great Wall of China, which was built to protect the rest of China from some sort of invasion. But it's not an ancient concept. It didn't stay in the Great Wall of China. is something you see today. For example, this wall that separates the West Bank from the rest of Israel. It is there to keep the Palestinians in their dedicated area, and it's there to stop them from having access to the services of the rest of the country and to prevent them from immigrating inside through, again, highly policed entrance points and passes. Although I think this is actually one of the main things that I think is a bit inaccurate about Ba Sing Se, is that there's all these huge walls, but you never see any graffiti on them. If it's a big city like that, it's going to have graffiti. I mean, just look here. This is human nature. Graffiti. Ye old Donald Trumpus on this wall, on the symbol of oppression and power.
I think that also shows just how strict the people or the police system in Ba Sing Se is to prevent people from painting on those walls, or how structured their system is, that if people do paint over it, they probably paint over the graffiti that people
Mm.
put there themselves.
Yeah, that's true. It's so true.
And then we also read a book which is by Andele Konita, which is headed Why We Reject the Poor Instead of Helping Them. And here in this book, she examines how societal values prioritize reputation and economic success. So this marginalizes those who do not contribute to conventional economic terms. So, in the modern societies, often value individuals based on their economic utility. This leads to the exclusion of those who are poorer or as well as unemployed.
She coined the term aporophobia, which means a fear of the poor. And she coined it because she said that if you cannot name something, it's harder to speak about. So she coined that term. And she said that it manifests physically through segregation, as those with economic power build walls and fortresses to hide away from the ugliness that is poverty. When you can't see the damage that you cause, it's easier to justify it. Historian Tony Hopkins states that the less information that is available, the more firmly opinions can be held about it, i.e., the less people know about the struggles of poverty, the less people care. The less Israelis know about the struggles of the Palestinians, the less they care. However, to maintain the illusion of power and its struggles, it takes an enormous amount of effort, money, and time to maintain that structure. I mean, let's take it into this. What does it actually take to maintain such a highly segregated society like in Ba Sing Se? Um, I mean, for example, you've got the Dai Li and Lake Lahagai, where they keep their little secret, how do I put it this way? Like a little Area 51, but for Ba Sing
Mm.
Se.
And in one of the readings we did for one of our modules, which is called the Planning Thought module, we did a reading from Njoh, 2009, and in one of the lectures we focused on colonies. So, and in this reading, it spoke about the 5 different forms of power over. So, as in removing a person's ability to choose. And we can see that they're also being used in Ba Sing Se. For example, the first one is force, and you can see it's the Dai Li who arrest and brainwash people for speaking up against their governmental system.
And even
This
just speaking up against the war, because one of the main things is that they don't allow anyone to speak up against about the war because they want to maintain that perfect illusion that everything is fine.
Our economy would be ruined. Our peaceful way of life, our traditions would disappear.
There's no war in Ba Sing Se.
What are you talking about? Where do you think all the refugees come from? You can't hide it.
In silencing talk of conflict, Ba Sing Se remains a peaceful, orderly utopia. The last one on Earth.
The next one is coercion. So this is where the citizens are actually threatened with re-education if they do speak up about this war.
Ask about the war with the Fire Nation. I don't know.
The third one is seduction. So this one's basically the rumors that everyone can hear about Ba Sing Se. Ba Sing Se basically appears as like a peaceful and prosperous place that lures people into compliancy. And the status and the protection it gives to those that cooperate. This creates like a sense of privilege to live in the city.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. But it also focuses on manipulation. It's a psychological conditioning that everything is perfect. The Earth King, even though he's supposed to be the one with the most power, is actually quite powerless because the Dai Li, the Secret Service, have actually manipulated him into thinking that everything is perfect and that he only really needs to worry about throwing birthday parties for his pet bear. And they kept him isolated in his palace, so he never actually left his palace before the gang comes along and fights against the Dai Li. But that was the first time he really left the palace and is actually able to see all the issues that his inactivity has caused. And then the last one is segregation, good old-fashioned segregation. It's the ring system which enforces strict class divisions and that limits people's movements and their interactions. The high walls and its isolation make the people who live in the inner rings more oblivious to the struggles to those in the outer rings. And they cannot even interact because there's this big wall in between them. So they can't even interact and say, hey, it sucks to live here, because they are deliberately kept away from each other.
There are the ones outside protecting us and the ones inside that help maintain order.
And even though Ba Sing Se is actually like a fictional city, its method of control mirrors the real-world systems of oppressions, which make it a powerful allegory for understanding how power operates and maybe even just what we can do against it.
True. At these different margins, the low-income residents, the public transit users, the informal workers, they're all disregarded because the decision-making processes are guided by financial institutions rather than actual demographic deliberations. Therefore, even if the Dai Li didn't exist to disempower them, the citizens in the lower ring will not be able to have any agency to control or to change the way that the city is being run.
Which is actually something that we see today. Even though a lot of our countries don't have this secret service conspiracy level, oh, I'm in control of everything, there's very obvious ones that are in control of everything. I mean, if you just take example, Elon Musk and Donald Trump, like perfect allegory. Recently it was actually found that Elon Musk had its what do they call the Twitter AI person, the Grok? The Grok. So he'd actually purposefully fed it false information about white genocide in South Africa to contribute to this image that there's this genocide happening here, even though all the information is obviously otherwise. So yeah, he's definitely using a bit of manipulation, coercion there to try get in the white refugees. I don't know why are they importing white refugees. So yeah, it is definitely something that people can then use once they've watched the show. It's easier to identify these things in real life as well. But let's conclude. What is the actual pros and cons of living in Ba Sing Se? I'm going to start us off with the pros. So first of all, safety. The outer wall does give protection against external threats. It was the safest place during the 100-Year War. And so that's a pro, I would say. I don't want to live in a war zone. So yeah. Economic opportunities. The city's size and diversity offers a lot of various job opportunities, especially for merchants and artisans. So I would think that's a pretty big pull factor as well, even if there wasn't a wall. And then lastly, cultural richness. Ba Sing Se is the hub of the Earth Kingdom. And so they have a lot of culture going around art, music, and other traditions. However,
Looking at the actual cons of living in this place, the main one being the social inequality, this rigid class system that creates significant disparities in the living conditions, as well as the opportunities when you're looking at the inner wall where the palace is compared to the two outer walls. Then also the restricted freedom that it brings. So movement between the different rings is extremely controlled and it's limiting the social mobility of people. The political corruption that exists here, the daily manipulating undermines the actual trust that people should have in this government. And the last one being the overcrowding. The lower ring is extremely overcrowded and poorly maintained, leading to the difficult living conditions for many of the residents in the space.
so really when you look at the symbols and the themes of Ba Sing Se in Avatar: The Last Airbender, it's really more than just the city. It's a metaphor. It represents the illusion of safety in isolation, I think. And
It shows how power can corrupt, even in the name of peace. It challenges us to question what we've been told and to seek the truth, even when it's hidden behind huge walls.
so thank you everyone for joining us today. We will see you next time. Say yes, my people.